channel. Robert Kesakos is your usual suspect. Welcome back to yet another live broadcast on your favorite football updates channel. It's a pleasure to be back with you on this beautiful um on this beautiful Friday morning, the 10th of April 2026. Yes. To this morning we'll be talking about excuse me, we'll be doing a weekend preview because unfortunately we will be unable to do our Friday night and Saturday morning live broadcasts as has always been the case due to some emergency that I need to tend to. I hope it doesn't drag me beyond those timelines. That will be my hope. But yeah, we will not be able to do those two broadcasts. And this is contrary to what we did experience yesterday. It's not a power issue. It's not an internet issue. It's simply out of other life engagements that will sort of forbid me from being available for this broadcast. For those two broadcasts. So do bear with me until when I do return. Just like you are kind enough to bear with me during that internet shutdown in the country during the January 2026 presidential and parliamentary elections, that we did witness in Uganda. So kindly bear with me on that one, really. So, like I said, this morning we'll be talking about the preview, the weekend preview. The Premier League does return in what feels like forever, in 3 weeks. So, some really important games to get through. We'll be talking about, we'll get the updates from the Spanish La Liga, and then we'll also, and from elsewhere around Europe. But before we get it all in order, I wish to, today we'll be having, I think, two videos are coming out. They should both be coming out. One is about Andy Robertson because he's leaving the club. That's Liverpool. In fact, it was supposed to premiere this morning, but unfortunately, I was unable to finish the edits or on time for me to have it premiered. So it is going to premiere shortly or very shortly or immediately after this broadcast. So then also we'll have another one talking about Arsenal's situation and their plans for the summer. We'll get into that. If time does allow us, we could do one about Newcastle because there's some news regarding Newcastle. So yeah, plenty of content is coming underway on the Football Tribe UG channel, provided the stars align for us in that regard. Anyways, okay. Really, I wish to send my sincere vote of thanks to all of those of you that were part of last night's broadcast. Thank you so much for endeavoring to make the time. We've just put out that post announcing the absentia that we won't be here for Friday night's broadcast and the Saturday morning broadcast. So kindly bear with me on that one. So good morning to you, Raymond. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Depending on where you join us from, so perhaps it's a good evening. Raymond is already chipping in with a comment. He says, hi, Crystal Palace versus Newcastle, Oliver Glasner and Ed Howe should be sacked. etc. You talk about, okay, now you talk about wanting Xabi Alonso to be appointed. Now, unfortunately, Raymond, David Hopkinson, the CEO of Newcastle, does not give any indication of whether Newcastle are looking to make a managerial change in the summer. I think, I do not know why that is the case, but that is the prerogative. I know we've spoken about the situation before, and I've given you my views on where I stand in regards to that Newcastle managerial role. But yeah, good morning, Milton. Milton does join us from London. At least that's what he says. It's a pleasure to have you back, Milton. For those of you that are just joining us, kindly like the broadcast, but also consider subscribing to the channel as we get through this broadcast. So, good morning to you, sir, as well. So, like I said, Alexander Trent-Arnold will be leaving, Andy Robertson will be leaving Liverpool at the end of the season after 9 seasons at the club. Please forgive me if you do hear any protruding noise. Somebody has decided to turn on their tree cutting machine. Anyways, so I'll try to be as audible as I possibly can and hope that my noise cancellation can do me the absolute favor. So, like I was saying, he'll be leaving the club after 9 seasons. Same story, similar to that of Mohamed Salah. Like all good things come to one end. It is the end of the road by the end of the season for the 32-year-old Scotland international. They signed him in 2017 from Hull City for a reported £8 million. So he's been a very, very diligent servant. Thus far, he's made, I think, about 372 Premier League appearances, scored only 11 goals and provided 60 assists, which is a very, very good contribution. Then also in the other news regarding Liverpool is that they are continuing to advance with talks with Ibrahim Konate over him renewing his contract with the Reds. That is after Real Madrid was pulled out of the race to sign him as a free agent in the summer. Those talks ended, I think, in November, according to Fabrizio Romano. That's in regards to Liverpool. Then so that's the important news. Then last night we did talk about Barcelona launching their appeal to UEFA of filing their appeal. Sorry, not an appeal. Their complaint, their formal complaint to UEFA about the officiation of the first leg of the quarterfinals of the UEFA Champions League, in which they thought they should have had a penalty, but it wasn't given. I think the incident around the 54th minute thereabout. So, anyways, the Premier League does return. It's been the UEFA Champions League. It's been the UEFA Europa League. It's been the UEFA Conference League. And that's what we had yesterday. So in terms of yesterday, in terms of yesterday, we did witness Aston Villa put 3 past Bologna. Ensbury Konsa among the goal scorers, and the burst from Ollie Watkins was enough to ensure that Aston Villa are in a commanding lead ahead of the reverse fixture next week, with Jonathan Rowe scoring what turned out to be a mere consolation for Bologna. Then FC Porto and Nottingham Forest settled for a 1-1 draw with both goals scored by FC Porto players, one scored by William Gomez, and the other scored by Fernandes. Matemi Fernandes. It was an own goal, very, very unfortunate in that regard. Then Celta Vigo lost to Freiburg by 3-0. That is in the quarter-finals of the UEFA Europa League. So then one of the quarter-final games of the UEFA Europa League had been played the day prior. That was on Wednesday between Braga and Real Betis, and it ended in a 1-1 draw with Betis playing away from home. Then in the UEFA Conference League, we do have Rayo Vallecano who put 3 past AEK Athens, while Crystal Palace managed to put 3 past Fiorentina. Not the kind of result that I had seen coming in Crystal Palace winning with that sort of margin, but yeah, it was a home game at Selhurst Park where you had the likes of Jean-Philippe Mateta score from the penalty spot in the 24th minute, while Tyrick Mitchell also got himself on the score sheet, as well as Ismail Sarr in the 90th minute to give Crystal Palace a commanding lead after the first leg. Then Mainz 05 beat up against Strasbourg by 2-0, while Shakhtar Donetsk beat up against AZ Alkmaar by 3-0. What are your predictions for this season? My predictions for this season, that's too broad a question, Milton, unless you would want to sort of narrow it a bit down. But if you're asking about my Premier League predictions, please go over to the channel. There's a pinned video about my predictions for the 2025-2026 Premier League season. Now, I must acknowledge that even though we still have 7-8 games left to play, many of those predictions may not come to life. For example, my prediction was that Arsenal will win the Premier League title, that Liverpool would come second. They are far from it. That Manchester City would come fourth, with Chelsea coming third. It doesn't look like the case. I thought, in my prediction, Manchester United were to finish 7th on the Premier League log, but I think the sacking of Ruben Amorim changed that. And those are not the kinds of things that sometimes we do envision going into the season. I had not predicted that Enzo Maresca would be sacked at this point in time, that Liam Rosenior would be in charge. In my prediction for the teams that would be relegated, I think I had Brentford, they are far from the bit of relegation. I think I had Sunderland and Burnley with Leeds away to safety. But from the look of things, it's going to be Wolverhampton Wanderers, Burnley, and possibly West Ham United. So you can see how things have taken the turn. In the Spanish La Liga, my prediction was that Barcelona would win the Spanish La Liga, that Atletico de Madrid would come second and Real Madrid third. I think we went for Villarreal, and Pedri, to come fourth. Then in the German Bundesliga, it was the usual. Bayern Munich to win the Bundesliga. And then in the French League One, for Paris Saint-Germain to win the French League One. In the Italian Serie A, I did not have it as a prediction. I don't remember what my predictions were. In fact, I don't remember making any. But if I ever did, I do not think I predicted that Napoli would defend the Scudetto. So, in as far as the UEFA Champions League, I talked about who the favorites are for that. We talked about Bayern Munich. We talked about Arsenal. We talked about Real Madrid. I do not think PSG will defend their crown. It will be not miraculous, but it will be quite the precedent for me. Very good predictions, I think. Okay. I do not think PSG will defend their crown. I do not remember a team that won the Champions League for the first time in the modern Champions League era, starting, I think, 92, thereabout, to have won it for the first time and then defended it the subsequent season. So they would stand to make that history. So I do not envision them doing that, even though they are in a strong lead after the first leg of the semi-finals of the competition. So that's that with that regard. Then also, the other prediction, in as far as the UEFA Champions League is concerned, those were my predictions. That Bayern Munich, Arsenal, Real Madrid would be favorites. I went on to add Barcelona and Liverpool, but it looks like those ones are letting us down thus far, but do not rule out anything. We know how all the first legs of the quarterfinals ended, and we can only hope that, I don't know, depending on what team you pay allegiance to, you will be hoping that the status quo is maintained, while others will be hoping for an upset. Like I oftentimes say, football, when you go back to the first video that I ever made for this channel, I talked about football being the source of agony, and also as well as agony from defeat, and then jubilations from triumph or victory. So you have that. Anyways, like I said, the Premier League does return. It does feel like it has been forever since we last watched some Premier League action, and it all starts tonight. But like I said, apologies, guys. I won't be here for our Friday night broadcast as well as the Saturday morning broadcast due to some life emergencies. So action begins at tonight when West Ham United take on Wolverhampton Wanderers. That's another relegation derby in its own right. The previous relegation derby was between Nottingham Forest and Tottenham Hotspur, and Nottingham Forest came out on top when they beat Tottenham Hotspur by 3-0. So that was in their last Premier League outing. In as far as West Ham are concerned, I think they lost to, maybe gave is a strong word to use. But yeah, they were the first team that Wolverhampton Wanderers beat this season to register their first victory of the season. And that was after the first half of the season. So for those of you that can't remember. Then action will continue on Saturday with the early kickoff coming between Arsenal and the AFC Bournemouth at 2:30 p.m. While at 5 p.m. it will be Brentford against Everton. And then we'll have a Burnley at the same kickoff time against Brighton and Hove Albion. And at 7:30 p.m., Liverpool will be up against Fulham. Then on Sunday, we'll have Crystal Palace at 4 p.m. take on Newcastle, while Nottingham Forest will be at home against Aston Villa, while Tottenham Hotspur will be playing away to Sunderland. And then Chelsea at 6:30 p.m. will be up against Manchester City. Sir, do you get all the games and highlights? Do I get all the games and highlights? I may not watch all games, but I try as much as I can to consume as much as possible in terms of match reports and highlights, depending, just to be ready to give you the right reports and information for the purposes of the success of this forum. I wouldn't want to sit here and then I'm guessing what happened. And usually, if I did not watch a game, I'll be honest with you to say I did not watch the game, but based on what I did witness, or sorry, what I've read or highlights I've seen or result, this is the kind of picture that I can paint for you. Okay. Then on Monday Night Football, Manchester United will be up against Leeds United. Manchester United have been giving us preseason vibes. I don't know if any of you guys follow them on X, but the kinds of content that they've been putting out there, it does feel like it's preseason for them. I mean, they went away, I think, to Scotland for a training camp. Jesus Christ. I mean, anyway, you can't blame them. It's been 3 weeks since they last played a game of Premier League football, and actually 3 weeks ever since they played a game of football. Because if I reduce it to the Premier League, it will feel like, oh, well, all other clubs have not played a game of football in 3 weeks. Others have been busy. Now, ever since Arsenal's last Premier League game, which was the week prior to the FA Cup final, to the Carabao Cup final, Manchester United have only played one game. That was, I think, the 2-2 draw against FC Bournemouth. I think that was their last result in their last outing. Since then, and I think it came on a Friday night. We've had a whole international break. We returned from the international break. Teams played FA Cup games. Teams have played Champions League games or European football games in the Europa League and the UEFA Conference League. And Manchester United, for all that time, have been up in vibes. So we'll get to discuss their game on Monday. So trust me, we have all the time, just like they've had all the time, to prepare for that particular fixture against Leeds. So we'll wait for them on Monday. God willing, inshallah. Given the life, will be here on Monday morning to discuss their game. Nonetheless, we'll start off with the game between West Ham United and Wolverhampton Wanderers in terms of our weekend preview is concerned. You know, forgive me, guys, it's a bit hot already this morning. It's quite bright and sunny out there here in Kampala, Uganda. Anyways, so West Ham United and Wolverhampton Wanderers. Wolverhampton Wanderers still have a slim chance that they could survive relegation if, and this is a big if they can win all their remaining games. I mean, they do not have the luxury of literally losing. They still have 7 games left to play. If they win all 7 games left to play, that gives them 21 points. Those 21 points, in addition to the 17 they have, would land them at about 38 points. Oh, is it 38? Forgive my mathematics. Yes, 38 points. Now, if let's say Leeds, Nottingham Forest, and Tottenham Hotspur did not win any game of football between now and the end of the season, that would put Wolverhampton Wanderers above those teams, you know. So that's why I say they still have a chance. Jesus Christ is the way, the truth, and the life. Jesus Christ loves you. Thank you so much. Napo Official. Is it Napo Official? Something like that. Thank you so much for your kindness. So, anyways, but we'll leave the ifs for the future. In terms of form, Wolves have been quite a bit resurgent, I must acknowledge. They forced Arsenal into a 2-2 draw, lost to Crystal Palace by 1-0, beat up against Aston Villa by 2-0, beat up against Liverpool by 2-1, and held Brentford to a 2-2 draw. And they went 2-0 down in that last fixture against Brentford. But they managed to crawl their way back into an equalizer and salvage a point out of that game. West Ham, on the other side, have lost 2 of their last 5 games and drawn 2, released winning only 1, and that was a 1-0 victory away to Fulham. So, whereas on paper, Nuno Espirito Santo has looked as one of the better managers ever since the turn of the new year, those last 5 games have not been the ideal results, you know. Every defeat to West Ham feels like a dagger in the heart because they're desperate. They are really, really desperate to survive. They would want to stay in the top flight. However, they must work for it. They have worked. It has not yet worked out too well for them. They will be hoping that Tottenham, they'll be hoping that they take care of their business and Tottenham stumble this weekend because before Tottenham play, they have a chance to go above them if they can beat up against Wolverhampton Wanderers. Like I said, the first leg between the two sides ended in a 3-0 victory for Wolverhampton Wanderers, and that was on, excuse me, that was on 3rd Jan, and that was the first victory for Wolverhampton Wanderers this season. I stand to be corrected, but I think it was match day 20 of the Premier League. So, Wolverhampton Wanderers have won 2 of their last fixtures against West Ham, while they had lost the 3 prior to that. But those both victories have come at home at Molineux, and this time around they're going away to the London Stadium, where they've not won a game of football in their last 2 visits, losing both of them by 2-1 and 3-0 respectively. So, however, I find that this Wolverhampton Wanderers team, it came to that point where I think they acknowledged that we have nothing to lose. In having nothing to lose, they were fighting not to have the worst record of a relegated team. I think Derby County has one of the worst records of a relegated team. I think they could only amass what? Was it either 19 or 25 points? So it started with that. And those 3 victories they've since registered have given them hope that maybe if we fight well enough and hope, perhaps in both wishfulness or hoping against hope, that that their relegation rivals do stumble or do not post the results that they need, because that's the only way that they get to stay. And by the way, West Ham goes down in history as a team that's ever been relegated with the highest number of points. And as unfortunate as that sounds, I think they got relegated despite amassing 42 points. And you have to go back many, many seasons ago when that happened. Was it 2000? I need to find out. But it was many, many years ago. So you find that they know the risk. I do not think they've done well enough to deserve to stay up over the course of the entire season. Yes, that was in 2002, 2003. Despite amassing 42 points, they still got relegated. So those bad memories will live on with them. And that's because they drew, I think they drew their final game of the season. Whereas I like Nuno Espirito Santo as a manager, things at West Ham have not gone his way, largely. If you go to the form table ever since the turn of the new year, West Ham have been one of the better performing sides. But it's nonetheless not evident enough of that, because I think they've amassed about 15 points or plus. That's more than many, many teams have managed, by the way. So, but even with that, because they had a very, very poor first half of the season, you see that they still dragging their feet, in trying to crawl their way back. So it's going to be a very difficult game. I think Somerville, the likes of Somerville, are going to be back. Thomas Suchek You want those kinds of players to be at the top of their game. Castellanos, Aaron Wan-Bissaka, you know, if West Ham are to have a chance of winning this game, because we're talking about a very, very stubborn Wolverhampton Wanderers side who we've seen hold Arsenal to a 2-2 draw despite going to Ghost Town. We've seen it against Brentford. We've seen them stand Liverpool. We've seen them stand Aston Villa. We've seen them, of course, they lost to Crystal Palace, but nonetheless, they had a fairly good performance. So, I don't know. It feels like this game could end in a draw, even though draws are not something very synonymous. Sorry, very common in this fixture, you know? They're not very common in this particular fixture. But I do get the sense that the game could end in a draw, you know, in that regard. So, anyways, apologies. I keep sweating, so I do not have AC or a fan in my room or where I'm shooting from. So that's why I have to, you know, like I said, it's a very, very hot morning. I don't know, for some reason. Nonetheless, moving on. So I'll go for a draw in that one. Then a very, very important game on Saturday in the early kickoff. That's between Arsenal and FC Bournemouth. Now, guys, early kickoffs are a thorn in the foot. Early kickoffs are very, very difficult games. I do not know why, but for some reason and to some extent, largely it's the big teams that often tend to suffer. Now, the conundrum for the Arsenal is, one, they come into this particular fixture with another game to think about, even though they do not have the luxury to think about it. First of all, they played in midweek on Tuesday. They were away in Portugal against Sporting CP, a game that they managed to win by 0-0. That goal scored by Kai Havertz. Unfortunately for them, they had this first substitution of captain Martin Odegaard, and we are yet to ascertain whether he'll be back in time. But he had that sort of look on his face of disappointment, of, you know, when something bad has happened to you before and then it happens again, you often have that look of, does it really have to be me? Does it have to get this bad? Does it have to resurface at this point? You know, because in starting that UEFA Champions League game, Martin Odegaard was starting his second consecutive game ever since his return from injury. And as unfortunate as it sounds, it is his sad reality. On the other hand, they will be encouraged by the return of Belechi Eze, who has since returned to training, perhaps ahead of schedule, because a lot of initial reports had suggested that he would return or he would be back just in time for their trip away to the Etihad Stadium, which will be next weekend after they play Sporting CP at home in midweek. So you have that. Now, the absence of Martin Odegaard is one that will cause a few concerns, because for Arsenal this season, it's always felt like when one player returns, another is going out through injury. Literally, for every game they've played, they've come away with an injury. Be it a serious injury, be it a minor injury, be it a knock that cost a player another game. It's sort of been that kind of situation. So, as unfortunate as it sounds, they must still find a way to try and win. We're talking about an AFC Bournemouth side that managed to beat them home and away last season. Albeit they managed to beat them earlier, Arsenal managed to beat them earlier on this season by 3-2. You remember when Gabriel Magalhaes had that blind pass that fell to Evan Nilsson and he converted, you know. So, like I said, Arsenal will come into this game with part of them thinking about the game in the subsequent week against Sporting CP, but they do not have the luxury of dwelling on that game because this game is of great significance. Every game they win in the Premier League is how closer they step towards winning the Premier League title. It's not yet done. It's far from sealed. Now, should they stumble in this particular fixture, a lot of questions are going to be raised to the manager in Mikel Arteta. We know that Manchester City are breathing down their necks and still have a game in hand. Even though the 9 points difference between them and Manchester City sounds one too many, given the kind of stage we are at in the season, that game in hand that Man City have gives you the indication that maybe they could mount quite the comeback. But we will not dwell on the strength of Manchester City. We'll look to those of Arsenal. First of all, in terms of this fixture itself, it's a kind of fixture that Arsenal know how to win. Apart from losing it home and away last season, they had won it home and away the season prior and beating AFC Bournemouth quite convincingly by 4-0 at the Vitality Stadium before a reverse fixture win over 3-0. So, they'll be hoping that they can draw to the same inspiration, or perhaps the legs that took them through the first leg to win this one. It was a brace from Declan Rice and a goal that restored parity from Gabriel Magalhaes that decided the tie. But in between there, you had a goal from Junior Kropi, one of those, one of those youngsters that have made quite a name for themselves this season. Junior Kropi ran. So this AFC Bournemouth side have some really, really decent players that are capable of hurting you. George Petrovic, I think, has been a decent servant in goal. Was signed in the summer from Chelsea. Adrian Trafford signed in the summer, I think, from Stade Rennes as a replacement for Milos Kakes. Senesi and Hill. I'm trying to remember the other Daxing defender that they do have in their squad. Bafode Diakite, yes. Bafode Diakite is the name I was trying to remember. And then Gimenez have been quite good. Alex Scott, Marcus Tavernier, Kluivert has been missing in action for quite some time, but David Brooks, unfortunately, they lost Antoine Semenyo, even though it hasn't looked like they missed him a great deal. Evan Nilsson, goals have not come for him as many as he would have hoped for, but they do remain a very, very strong side that are capable of beating up on any opponent. So that is the sort of, if you watch that Manchester United game, the 2-2 draw, trust me, you'll have shivers down your spine knowing that they can be scintillating. The likes of Adil, Ryan Christie, Alex Scott, Ryan, very, very good, team. Marcus Tavernier has that knack of striking the ball from distance with his sweet, I think, left foot. So it's going to be a tough afternoon for the Arsenal. Like I said, having played in midweek and needing to play in this one as well in an early kickoff because of their responsibilities going into midway next week against Sporting CP, you do not feel really, really encouraged. However, like I said, the return of players like Eberechi Eze will give them some bit of encouragement. I think Mikel Arteta may seek to make, I don't think he will make many changes to his starting 11 in any case. I think he will go with David Villa in goal. He will go with Ben White at right back because I do not think Jurriën Timber is fully back fit, even though he did allude prior to the Sporting CP game that he was looking forward to welcoming back Jurriën Timber and Bukayo Saka for this particular fixture. Maybe do you, even if they are fully back fitted, maybe you give them a couple of minutes in the second half and then look to start them in that reverse fixture against Sporting CP. Excuse me. And probably subsequently away to Manchester City. So I'll go with Ben White at right back, even though the last two games haven't been the best of performances in Arsenal colours. Gabriel Magalhaes and William Saliba with Ricardo Carafiori at left back. So yeah, given the significance of this, and because Arsenal need to win the Premier League title, they do not have the luxury of rotating their squad just anyhow. They want all those 3 points. I'm sure they want them. Then the midfield, Declan Rice, Martin Zubimendi, I think ahead of them could be Eberechi Eze, But I'm going to go on a limbo phase and think it's going to be Kai Havertz. Kai Havertz to start ahead of Ebeleche Eze. Then we'll see Victor Yokers at the tip. We'll see Noni Madueke to the right and Leandro Trossard to the left. I think that's what we will see. Even though I don't think he's going to start Gabriel Martinelli or Gabriel Jesus, it will be a surprise if it does make those changes, because this game is as significant as the game against Sporting CP because of the context of the Premier League title race. So early kickoffs are incredibly difficult, but because 2:30 p.m. is basically a half past midday on the other side of the aisle at the Emirates Stadium. But I'm going to go with a narrow Arsenal win of 2-1 or 1-0. That's my prediction. That's my prediction for that particular fixture. Okay. Okay, then moving on. Brentford against Everton should be a very, very entertaining fixture. Both teams have hold European football qualification ambitions, with Everton coming in 8th place and Brentford 7th. Both have 46 points. They've had an identical sort of results in terms of 31 games played, 13 won, 7 drawn, and 11 lost. They beat identical in that sense. Brentford have a very, very good side, but sometimes they can get beat. Sometimes they can get beat. We know they punished Everton, beating them by 4-2 in the first leg. But last season, they were all draws. A 1-1 draw at the GTEC Stadium and a goalless draw at Goodison Park. This time around, it's the Hill Dixon Stadium where they lost 4-2. Then when you go back to the season prior to last, you'll find 2 consecutive victories for Everton in as far as the last 5 fixtures go. So Brentford have drawn 3 of their last 5 games. They've lost 1 and won 1, while Everton on the other side have lost, I think, 2 and won the other 3. Difficult game to predict. I saw Everton beat up against Chelsea by 3-0. I was really, really encouraged by their performance. But given how stubborn Brentford can be, I'll go for a 1-1 draw in that one. Kevin Shada, Igor Thiago are players of concern for that Everton defense, just as well as Iliman Ndiaye, Dwight McNeil, Beto or Thionbari will be for the same, will be difficult opponents to tame for that Brentford defense of Michael Kayode and among others. Michael Kayode, one of the best throw-in players the Premier League has had this season. So yeah, he did cause 1 penalty and win another in their 2-2 draw against that was against Wolverhampton Wanderers. So that's about it. So I'll go for a 1-1 draw in that one. Then Burnley versus Brighton. I do not think Burnley have much to fight for. We've had the resurgence of Brighton lately. They've won their last 2 consecutive games. In fact, they've won 4 of their last 5, losing only to Arsenal, beating up against Brentford by 2-0, Nottingham Forest by 2-1, Sunderland by 1-0, and Liverpool by 2-1. While in sharp contrast, the other side, Burnley have lost 3 of the last 5, managing only 2 draws against Bournemouth and Chelsea, while they lost games to Brentford, they lost games to Everton and to Fulham. So it's not looking encouraging for Scott Parker's side. I think Fabian Hatzler is going to try and push equally for that top 7 finish, because he's only 3 points adrift of the 7th place that would earn you, a UEFA Conference League football. That's far. So he's going to try and push for that. Therefore, I'll give Brighton to win the game by 2 goals to nil. So that will be my prediction for Brighton versus Burnley. Then Liverpool against Fulham. Now, Liverpool are caught between a rock and a hard stone. They have a reverse fixture of the quarterfinals of the UEFA Champions League to think about, and against a very difficult opponent like PSG. Then you have a game against Fulham, ideally which you want to win and brighten your sort of chances of finishing within the top 5. They are currently 5th on the Premier League log. That's Liverpool. So if the season were to end here, they will be taking the 5th slot of the Premier League for the UEFA Champions League. That would be the case. But like I keep saying, I've not had enough evidence about Liverpool being good on a consistent basis to give you the imagination that they are going to turn up and play a very, very good game. However, they are capable. Like I keep saying, on paper, Liverpool have arguably one of the best teams there is in the Premier League. They just can't seem to make it count. They just do not fight hard enough. Sometimes you feel they are not giving it 100%. The way they seek to do their ball recovery is oftentimes very, very lazy, which is not good for a team like Liverpool. It's no surprise that the reigning champions have lost 10 Premier League games thus far this season. It's not looking pretty for them, and drawn 7. And at 49 points, as you wait for Aston Villa to play, should be the encouragement for Liverpool. First of all, because they are pushing for a top 5 finish in the Premier League, they do not have the luxury of resting players, because in the reverse fixture against PSG still, you have no guarantees that you're going to go through. So why sacrifice one for the other and still miss out on the other? I keep saying it's Arsene Wenger who I used to remember for that kind of thing. He would rest players in a Premier League game, lose that game, hoping that the players he rested will help him win the subsequent game in a UEFA Champions League. And he ended up losing both games. And then you are asking yourself, so what was the instance of sparing those players and then ending up in the same undesirable situation? You'd have rather played them all and perhaps taken points in the earlier, fixture. So I do not know whether Arne Slot will be thinking the same thing, but it is a very, very difficult fixture that they come up against. Fulham is one of those teams that managed to beat Liverpool last season by 3-2. Earlier on this season, it was a 2-2 draw. You'll find, but prior to last season, last season they also had a 2-2 draw at Anfield. And then excuse me, Liverpool had won the other 2 prior fixtures. Forgive my over-yawning. I do not know the cause of this. But maybe due to insufficient sleep, I would want to imagine, So, Liverpool just had a poor game against PSV Eindhoven. I saw some comments from Peter Schmeichel trying to say Liverpool defended well, they avoided conceding more than 2 goals, blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking to myself, what bulk of nonsense is that? The same Peter Schmeichel has been season long been dead beaten, criticizing Arsenal for their defensive prowesses, describing them as conservative. When it comes to Liverpool, who played, by the way, with the back 5 literally, the tone is different. The narrative changes. Now, I do not hold him against his opinion. I just want to see a more consistent opinion. So, very true about Liverpool and Arsenal. Thank you so much, Milton. So, for Liverpool, the chance is still there to finish in the top 5. That's if they can take it on. However, should they sleep on the job, it is going to be there for the taking for Chelsea. We know for a fact that Chelsea are already out of the UEFA Champions League, so and in the semi-finals of the FA Cup, which do not come until late April, so it's not like they have too much divided attention. So if the because according to Arne Slot, he thinks that they can bounce back. He thinks that they can have a comeback against PSG, and indeed a comeback is possible, very possible. It will take quite the effort. But before they promise us of that effort, let them first give us the effort against Fulham over 90 minutes and win a game of football. Even though I feel this one could end in a draw. I feel this could end in a 1-1 draw or a 2-2 draw. I'm not so convinced about this Liverpool side, about them winning. So, yeah, that would be my prediction. First of all, Fulham has some really, really good players. Alex Iwobi, Calvin Bassey. When you talk about, I remember I did my best 11 for the season, and I included Harry Wilson. 8 goals thus far, and I think about 6 assists. He's been quite the player this season. He's been quite very good for that. Actually 10 goals and 6 assists. Yes, point of correction. 10 goals, 6 assists. He has a 16-goal involvement. So that tells you of what you to expect from the 29-year-old playmaker. Even though there's been speculation that he could leave the club at the end of the season, since his contract is due, So, yeah. Milton says, okay, for the Premier League teams, the qualification for UEFA Champions League is very important financially. Exactly. So, even winning the Champions League title, if you're Liverpool, is not enough to compensate for what you miss in not qualifying for the subsequent season. And unfortunately, when it comes to the UEFA Champions League, I don't know if it is the case. Do you return as a reigning champion? I think you return as a reigning champion. Because if the champion of the UEFA Europa League gets elevated to, to the Champions League, why wouldn't a Champions League winner automatically qualify? For the Champions League? Is that the case? So yeah, the Champions League winner automatically qualifies for the next edition, for the subsequent season. But in all fairness, when I look at Liverpool, even though they are capable of winning the UEFA Champions League, those chances, that window of qualification is far more difficult than it is finishing in these high places in the Premier League. That's your best chance. First of all, the finances involved, like Milton puts it. Today, teams are desperate to qualify for Champions League football, especially these big teams, because of the financial implications. First of all, Champions League qualification present day guarantees you at least £80 million plus. Now, those millions of money, of course, will depend on how you perform. But what clubs bank on first and foremost is a participation fees, then match day revenue, and then additionally winning bonuses or draws, things like that. But also the commercial revenue from other deals of the virtue of the fact that you in the Champions League become higher. And then, of course, the broadcast rights and things like that. So teams make a lot of money. That's why Manchester United desperately want to qualify for Champions League next season, because it will bring in at least £100 million for them. that they can use to reinvest in their squad and things like that. So you're right, Milton. So the question for Liverpool, are they going to capitulate against this Alex Iwobi side, against the Harry Wilson side? Like I said, they're very, very capable players, you know. When you watch Fulham play, Raul Jimenez, you know, he will pop up and score a good goal. Very, very good players in there for Fulham, you know. Sander Badge, Danny, Rodrigo Munoz, Joachim Anderson, very, very good player. Bernard Leno, Ante Robinson, Oscar Bob, recently signed for Manchester City, Castagna, that's Timothy Castagna, you know. So yeah, I think Liverpool may make some changes. For example, we could see Riongo Moha starting that game. We could see Mohamed Salah start that game. You know, we could see Alexander Isak start that game in a bid to try and rest some of their players. In that midfield, either McAllister or Dominic Szoboszlai could be sort of rested, and they start with Curtis Jones. So then in terms of their backline, maybe Andy Robertson starts at left back. You'd have to stick with Jeremy Frimpong at right back, you know. So those are some of the changes that Arne Slot can make to really staying very, very competitive to win a game of football that is in the weekend. Then quickly, Crystal Palace against Nottingham Forest. Crystal Palace against Newcastle. This game comes on Sunday. Newcastle are in a bit of a tough situation. Their finances are not looking good. In fact, they may be forced to sell one or two of their stars in the summer. Players like Bruno Guimaraes, Sandro Tonali, Tino Livramento, Anthony Gordon, Lewis Hall. Those are some of their prized assets, some of whom they could look to part ways with. First of all, to get on the right side of the finances, but also to finance their squad reinvestment. Last summer, they struggled to get their priority targets. Players like Brian Mbeumo left for Man United. Players like Joao Pedro joined Chelsea instead of Newcastle. Players like Hugo Ekitike ended up at Liverpool. Players like Benjamin Sesko ended up at United, so they had to settle for a Nick Voltmada, Yohan Wissa. They settled for Anthony Elanga, yet their aspirations had been bigger than that. So it's not good for, a Newcastle. Nonetheless, Crystal Palace tend to struggle in games that they play in the immediate aftermath of featuring in Europe. So because of those struggles, that's where I feel that maybe, just maybe, Newcastle could have a say in this game. Newcastle came from beating Man United, beating Chelsea, and lost to Sunderland, a game they had taken a lead in the Trainware Derby, for Sunderland to complete a league double against them. That in itself was quite embarrassing for Ed Howe, so you have that. So then you have so it's in that sort of nature. You look at their last 5 games. They've lost to Man City, they've lost to Everton, and then lost to Sunderland. In between there, they beat those Man United and Chelsea. They looked good in those games, but that game against Sunderland, they were far from convincing. I think the Premier League teams are very dependent on overseas owners. Very dependent on overseas owners. I do not think it changes much, even if the owners were home people. In other words, it's all about money. It's business. If the locals do not have the sufficient finances to invest in these clubs, then they don't get them. Sir Jim Ratcliffe wanted to buy Chelsea. He failed in his attempt to buy it, and it went to Toddy Body and Egbari and their partners. Newcastle was up for the taking. I do not remember of any English people that were up for the challenge. It ended up with the Saudi a public investment fund as owners. You look at how Arsenal acquired, how Stan Kroenke acquired Arsenal, buying out the Leicester, shareholder in Alisher Usmanov. Then, I mean, I do not think that's the issue, particularly for me. I do not think it's a dependence on overseas owners. It's just business. It's just business. Those guys have the money, so they're investing in them, regardless of what you may think of their motivations. The Glazers have owned Manchester United for quite a long time, and it wasn't until a little over a year ago, it wasn't, close on to 2 years now, that Sir Jim Ratcliffe bought a 25% stake that he increased to about 27 point something, So that's that. So I don't think there's that over dependence. Then when you look at Crystal Palace, Steve Parish, yesterday by the Crystal Palace won their game of football against Fiorentina by 3-0. A return of Jean-Philippe Mateta with the bank, Tariq Mitchell, and Ismail Sarr. However, the priority for Crystal Palace is one, trying to win the UEFA Conference League. Do you know how much it would feel for Crystal Palace to win their first major piece of silverware last season ever since their inception, when they beat Manchester City to win the FA Cup last season, and then follow that up with the triumph of the Conference League? That would also be of great significance to Oliver Glasner's CV. Why? Because last season he won the FA Cup. When you go back to 2022, he beat Rangers in the finals with Eintracht Frankfurt to win the UEFA Europa League. So, so that would mean quite a lot. So, in terms of priorities, I think Crystal Palace will prioritize the UEFA Conference League. Nonetheless, regardless of what team he does field, they tend to struggle on weekends or in games that come in the immediate aftermath of playing in Europe, So, and yet we talk about the Newcastle side, that they've only beaten once in their last 5, only 1 draw, and have lost the other 3. So Newcastle are desperate to return back to winning ways. Crystal Palace on the other side, the form has not been on their side. Because they drew against Leeds, but they had beaten Tottenham Hotspur by 3-1. They lost to Man United by 2-1. One away to Wolves. One against Wolves, that was at Selhurst Park by 0-0, but had lost to Burnley by 3-2. That Burnley result, you got questions over Crystal Palace, really. So even though Crystal Palace at home, I am still thinking they do not win this one. I don't see Crystal Palace winning that one. I don't see them winning that game, really. So anyways, then Nottingham Forest, Aston Villa. Nottingham Forest are still fighting for their lives, fighting against relegation, come up against an Aston Villa side that are beginning to pick up their pace. Those victories in the UEFA Europa League have done them a great deal in terms of motivations. But the return of Yuri Tillemans, a very, very important number 8, I saw him play, I think, alongside Amadou Onana yesterday, and it was quite good. So I feel that Aston Villa have the edge in this one. First of all, yes, they have the edge, but I must acknowledge what's at stake for both teams is no less significant. For Aston Villa, it's the pursuit for Champions League football in terms of the Premiership table. For Nottingham Forest, it's about survival. Nottingham Forest who have only won 2 of the last 5 and lost the other 3. Usually there are no draws in this particular one. So, I don't know. Both teams played in midweek in the UEFA Europa League. I'll go with Aston Villa to win 2-1. Sunderland against Tottenham Hotspurs. This is going to be the first game of Roberto Di Zerbi because the game after this will be away to his former bosses over Brighton and Hove Albion. So very difficult game. The Stadium of Light is a difficult place to go, but it has been breached thus far this season. Liverpool went there and won a game of football, and I think subsequent to Liverpool, I think it was Crystal Palace that won there a game of football. You know, it's no longer a very, very feared ground. Nonetheless, you cannot be complacent. I'm very eager to see how Tottenham play under Roberto Di Zerbi. Are we going to see very quick changes? Are we going to see spirited fights? Are we going to see a show of the continuation of what Spurs have been thus far this season? I do not have the encouragement that that's going to be the case. I have a feeling they could have that sort of new manager bounce and win this game of football, really. Maybe by a goal to nil or by 2-1, you know, there. So I'll go with Spurs. I'll go with Spurs because Sunderland have not beaten them in the last 5. Spurs have won 3, they've drawn 2. So the first leg between the two sides ended in a 1-1 draw, you know. So that's that. Then in the late kickoff for Sunday, Chelsea, Manchester City. Biggest game of the weekend. Not the most important, but it is the biggest in terms of stature. The two sides shared the spoils in a 1-1 draw in their first leg. Enzo Maresca was still in charge, but last season Man City beat Chelsea home and away, while the season prior it had been draws. Chelsea need to pick themselves up. Yes, they've already done so in the FA Cup, putting 7 past Port Vale, but Manchester City are no Port Vale. Liam Rafinha is going to be under pressure. He's going to be without Enzo Fernandez. He suspended himself for what he believed to be going over the line in a disciplinary sort of case with Enzo Fernandez's comments, which I did not think was too much, but maybe he just wanted to send a message of who is in charge, you know, in a way. So I respect it for what it is. Real Madrid have been a well-rested team. They do not have anything to worry about whatsoever. Manchester City were knocked out of the Champions League. Similar story with Chelsea. Both played in the FA Cup over the weekend, so they return again in weekly action. I have a feeling it's the kind of game that Manchester City may dominate, but Chelsea may come away with a point. That's my gut feeling. For Manchester City, we're going to see a return of Thibaut Courtois in goal, Matheus Nunes at right back. We could see Ryan Atonori at left back, Ruben Diaz alongside Mark Kehi or Kushanov. Then expect to see Rodrigo Cascante, Bernardo Silva alongside Ryan Cherki, Jeremy Doku, Anton Semenyo, and Bart Erling Haaland. Very, very strong team. On the side of Chelsea, expect to see Robert Sanchez, Malo Gusto, Marco Correa at left back, centre back pairing of Wesley Fofana and Trevor Chalobah. Midfield, Moises Caicedo alongside Andre Santos, with Cole Palmer ahead of them, Pedro Neto, Joao Pedro, and Garnacho, maybe. You know, that's all predictive. But at least they have very, very good games. You know, they have very, very good teams coming up against each other. Usually, what separates these two sides is not too many, but whoever is more hyped up for this one is who will take it. Chelsea want that top 5 finish. They are only a point behind Liverpool. They know Liverpool will have played on a Saturday. If Liverpool win against Fulham, even the more reason for Chelsea to try and win. If Liverpool draw or lose to Fulham, even the more reason for Chelsea to beat up against Man City to reclaim that 5th place, spot. For Manchester City, it is the Premier League title at stake. Not that it is theirs to lose, but it is still theirs to chase. You never know. by the time we get to that, for sure, Liam Ross Sr. is under pressure at Chelsea. Well, he's under pressure, but out of the 10 games he's managed Chelsea through the Premier League, they've won 5, they've drawn 2, and he's lost 3, losing to Newcastle, losing to Everton, and losing to Arsenal. So that report card is not that bad. So I think, first of all, I think both managers will be under pressure. It's just different pressure. Now, the game in itself is going to come at a time when Arsenal have already played. So there's a couple of scenarios for Manchester City. If Arsenal have stumbled against FC Bournemouth, Manchester City will be desperate to win to try and even close the gap with that game in hand, bearing in mind that they still have it. Should Arsenal win against FC Bournemouth, there'll be 12 points clear on the Premier League table, with City having 2 games in hand. And for City to recover, they would need to win against Chelsea. So it becomes a must-win fixture. So, in other words, Manchester City's life depends on it if Arsenal win. Because the last thing Man City would want is, let's say, for Arsenal to win, and then they can't beat up against Chelsea. If it's a draw, that's 11 points behind Arsenal. If it's a loss for Chelsea and Arsenal have won, it's 12 points. And even with their game in hand, it would then stand to be at 9 points, So that means it won't be good. It won't be good. It won't be good, really. So I sort of understand the stakes there. So, Manchester City have been too hot to handle. They dispatched Arsenal 2-0 in the cup final, demolished Liverpool 4-0 in the FA Cup. What are they going to do for Chelsea? What are they going to do to Chelsea? To be fair, or to be honest, it's a fixture that Manchester City often love to win, even though predominantly, again, the sort of disparities are not too many. Only 57 appearances between the two sides. 27 wins for Chelsea and 20 for Manchester City and 10 draws. That should tell you something. Sorry, that's in 47. In 57 appearances. So, I don't know. I have a feeling Manchester City could nick it. You remember how they won the game away against Liverpool at Anfield? Difficult, bit scrappy, not the best of games, but turning up and winning anyway. I have a feeling it could go that way, that Manchester City get to win that game. Maybe by 2-1 or 3-2. No, I'll go 2-1. Manchester City. So yeah, that's it for the Premier League in terms of what you should expect today, because of West Ham against Wolverhampton Wanderers. That's today. Then the games on Saturday, the games on Super Sunday. So today in the Spanish La Liga, Real Madrid are up against Girona. In the German Bundesliga, Augsburg take on Hoffenheim, while Pisa will be away to AC Roma. In the Italian Serie A, in the French League 1, AC Monaco will be away to Paris FC, while Metis will take on Fulham. So I spoke about the PSG situation yesterday to say that the French League are doing everything within their power to give PSG a bit of an advantage, So they're doing it. And PSG are leveraging on that advantage and blowing away teams. So do not expect to see PSG in action this weekend, I think. Okay. Moving on. Elsewhere, on Saturday, in the Spanish La Liga, Real Sociedad will be up against Deportivo Alaves. Elche will take on Valencia. Barcelona will be in the Catalan derby against Espanyol. We know that Barcelona equally will have that game to think about. in the UEFA Champions League for the return leg against Atletico de Madrid. Sevilla will be at home against Atletico de Madrid. So Atletico de Madrid, I think they're going to rest their players, hoping to seal the deal against Barcelona in the subsequent fixture of the UEFA Champions League reverse fixture for the quarterfinal. So both teams could make some changes. I don't think Barcelona would want to lose the derby, but it's of less significance to Barcelona than the Champions League game, because at least they have a 7-point lead. Nonetheless, by the time they get to play, it could have been reduced to 4 because, Madrid are up against Girona tonight. City have the outstanding manager in Pep Guardiola and the players in their squad. Yeah, Pep Guardiola on any day can make the difference in the way he sets up his team. Really, he can be the difference. He can be the difference on any given day. Okay. Then in the German Bundesliga, we will have Borussia Dortmund against Bayer Leverkusen at 4:30 p.m. That's a very, very big game on Saturday. Heidenheim will be up against Union Berlin. RB Leipzig will take on Borussia Mönchengladbach, while Wolfsburg will take on Eintracht Frankfurt, while in the late kickoff at 7:30 p.m., St. Pauli will be up against Bayern Munich. Then in the Italian Serie A, Cagliari will take on Cremonese at 4 p.m. Torino will take on Hellas Verona. At 7 p.m., we'll have AC Milan against Udinese, while at a quarter to 10 p.m., Atlanta will entertain Juventus. Okay, then in the French League 1, Auxerre will take on Nantes, while Red Stade Rennes will be up against Angers. So that's the action to come your way from the major 5 leagues in Europe on Saturday. And then on Sunday, we'll have Osasuna up against Real Betis. Mallorca will be up against Vallecano. Celta Vigo will take on Rio Oviedo, while Athletic Bilbao will be up against Villarreal. Then in the German Bundesliga, Werder Bremen will be away to Cologne, FC Cologne. Stuttgart will be at home against Hamburg, while Mainz 05 will be up against Freiburg. Then in the Italian Serie A, Genoa will take on Sassuolo. Parma will be up against Napoli. Bologna will take on Lecce, while Como will be at home against Inter Milan. Jesus Christ. Como play Inter Milan, and then they have to play him later this month in the reverse fixture of the Coppa Italia Cup. So then Nice will take on Le Havre. Toulouse will take on Lille. Lyon will be up against Lorient, not Leyton Orient. I don't know why Leyton Orient came in my mind. But yeah, that's the action you should be expecting from the major 5 leagues across Europe. But particularly, that's the preview for the Premier League. Allow me wrap it up here and wish you a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you so much, Milton, for being a valuable contributor to this morning's discussion. Okay, you have a comment there. Nepo, official, thank you so much. Okay, you say, sir, Spanish and Premier League teams do well in the Champions League. The Italian and German compete mainly with Bayern Munich. Yeah, to be honest, sometimes even Borussia Dortmund do well. Let's not forget they played in the finals in 2024 and lost to Real Madrid by 2 goals to 0. Yeah, but largely it's Bayern Munich that come up. When it comes to the Italian Serie A, oftentimes in the deeper stages of the competition, recently you've been finding Inter Milan, who have since played through two finals in 3 years. That's in 2023 and in 2025. It's largely the Premier League and then also do not forget PSG. They played the final and the reigning champions from last year in 2020, they played the final and lost to Bayern Munich by a goal to 0. That goal scored by Kingsley Coman in the 59th minute. Was it? So, yeah. Okay. Raymond Kangumba says, okay, now, let's see. Out of the quarterfinalists, you have only you have 2 Premier League teams in Liverpool and Arsenal. You have 3 Spanish La Liga teams in Real Madrid, Barcelona, and Atletico de Madrid. You have 1 German Bundesliga team, and you have 1 team from the French League 1, So yeah, that's the gist of it. Okay, let's see what teams make it to the semifinals. Definitely, you'll have a Spanish La Liga team because you have a head-to-head between two Spanish La Liga teams. Then for Premier League teams, nothing is guaranteed yet. Same applies for the Bundesliga teams and the French League One. You know, Raymond says, hi, Crystal Palace versus Newcastle. David Hopkinson relieved Eddie Howe from his duties and sack him from Newcastle now. And so, well, unfortunately, Raymond, David Hopkins has not indicated that they are looking to make a managerial change. So you may have to swallow the bitter pill and stick around with Ed Howe for the foreseeable future. I know it's been 4.5 years since he's been in charge. He's taken you to great strides. You've qualified for 2 different UEFA Champions Leagues. That's after finishing 4th in the 2022-2023 Premier League season. So you went in the Champions League for 2023-2024. Then you missed out on the UEFA Champions League for the subsequent season. That was 2024-2025, during the same season for which you qualified after finishing 5th on the Premier League log, and you are in the Champions League this season where you finished at the round of 16, losing to Barcelona 8-3 on aggregate score, even though that loss at Camp Nou is quite the embarrassment, you know. So anyways, guys, we have membership on the channel. Please go to the channel and subscribe for membership. It's not expensive. It's about relatively $2.5. So yeah, please go support the channel and become a member. Become a member. You know, you can always go to the channel and become a member. So you'll see it on the channel membership, and they'll sort of show you what needs to be done in as far as what you can do in how you can become a member. You know, it's not a very difficult process. Just click on membership and subscribe to become a member, you know. So yeah, that's it for me. Thank you so much, Raymond. Thank you so much, Milton, and every single one of you that has managed to like the broadcast, that has been part of the broadcast in whatever respect and capacity for whatever length of period of time. Our video about Liverpool, Andy Robertson and Ibrahim Konate does premiere after this show. Then shortly after, then we'll have another coming out later in the day. So I think it should be around 4 p.m. possibly. Is it around? No, should be earlier than 4 p.m. Maybe at around 2 p.m. thereabout. So we'll wait and see. Otherwise, have a blessed day and a blessed weekend ahead. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye for now. Stay blessed.